Hello everyone, it has been a couple weeks and for that I apologize, but today I have for you a very special list of recommendations. I have a back to school nonfiction reading list for you, so let's get into it. The first category we're going to get into is books that I've read and definitely recommend. So, pretty self-explanatory, I've read these before and I can tell you that they're very good books, worth your time. The first one, obviously, is Upstream by Mary Oliver. I could talk about this book forever, years. I've reread this probably 3 times. I've lent this out to people and had them annotate it for me. It is one of my prized possessions of books. And she just really... Mary Oliver is a poet, if you didn't know, and this is a book of essays. So it's not just individual poems. All of these kind of tie together, and it's all about her relationship with nature, her relationship with spirituality, and just general life, her mental health, her relationships, relationships to animals, and it's just beautifully written. And the cover is beautiful, and if you know me, you know that I judge a book by its cover. Sorry, but it's true. No use denying it. But there are just so many pages that have been annotated and underlined, and I just love it. So definitely pick this one up. It's a good short and sweet read. Next up, we've got Bowling Alone. Now, this book was written in the early 2000s, so it's a little bit outdated. However, I have annotated it a lot. So that tells me that it's still worth reading. It's still interesting, for sure. So the subtext is the collapse and revival of American community, and basically that's exactly what it is. It's talking about American community and how it has been on a decline over the last few decades. And it's so interesting reading about that from the perspective of someone who is pre-social media. This is just at the very beginning of the internet we're talking about. So for Robert Putnam to be talking about this and seeing a decline in community before social media even came on the scene is just really interesting. And you've got a lot of graphs in there to help explain all of the words. And I thought that this was going to be a really dense and hard to understand read, partially because of how many graphs and surveys were included, but also there's just so much information here. But I can happily say that I flew through this. I thought it was so interesting. I loved it. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars. It might have been 4, but either way, highly recommend if you're interested at all in the history of community and the history of third spaces, the rise and fall of online communities. It's just very fascinating. So definitely pick this up if you're interested in all of that. Next up, we've got something pretty niche, but it was the first book that I read this calendar year in 2024. Meet Me by the Fountain by Alexandra Lang. It's an inside history of the mall. And I loved it. It made me wish that mall culture was still poppin'. It made me want to live in the 80s. But this is another one that really ties in the concept of community and third spaces. That's apparently something that I've been very interested in this year, just the concept of third spaces and how necessary they are to society and a successful community. But this was so interesting, and just the beginnings of mall culture and where mall culture is at now, it's just fascinating. And there are pictures in there, which I love. I'm a big picture girl. And it's not very long either. It's a very accessible read. It's not going to make your brain hurt. It's just very fun and interesting. So I'd recommend this. Meet Me by the Fountain. I always want to say Meet Me Behind the Mall because of the Taylor Swift song. Next up, we've got another shorty, How to Resist Amazon and Why. This one is mostly talking about Amazon as a book business, because that's kind of how Amazon got its start. So it's How to Resist Amazon and Why, the fight for local economies, data privacy, fair labor, independent bookstores, and a people-powered future by Danny Kane. And like I said, very short. How many pages is this? Let's see. It's 175 pages, okay? So you're not going to be spending a lot of time with this, but it's a good time. And it's a lot of good information. You get some alternatives to Amazon in here. You start to understand why Amazon is such a soul-sucking company, and why Amazon is detrimental to bookstores everywhere. So, very important read, very short read, very easy read. Highly recommend. Next up, this is the dense one. This is the one that's kind of tough, okay? But it's really important, and I think that you will appreciate it after you've read it. And it's The Color of Law. This one, I knew nothing about like zoning laws going into this book. I was a very blank slate when it came to this, but I felt like it explained everything really, really well, to the point where I didn't really feel lost while I was reading it, which is really important. The little, what do you call it, subtitle? The second title is A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. So this is all about like how racist city planning is, and how that has affected our country over the decades. I haven't read this in probably a year, but I can still tell you that it has made a lasting impact on me. I've annotated the heck out of this. Like, I probably need to do a reread of it, to be honest. But I highly recommend it. I think I gave it 5 stars when I read it. Very important, very good, dense, but worth your time. So, The Color of Law. Now, we are getting into books that I haven't read, but I hope to be reading this fall semester of the school year. Now, this one I have read before, so this is a cheat, but I am planning on rereading it, and it is Witness to the Revolution by Clara Bingham. Yeah. Radicals, resistors, vets, hippies, and the year America lost its mind and found its soul. This is one of my favorite nonfiction books that I've ever read, probably. And she's big, okay? She's a big girl. But Clara interviews like hundreds of people that lived through the 60s and gets like firsthand accounts of all of this history. And it goes into like the anti-war protests. It goes into like the Black Panthers and how they got their beginnings, and it goes into like people getting drafted for the war and dodging the draft. It's just like all kinds of different perspectives. She talks a lot about the presidents that were in office at that time. Talks a lot about the Vietnam War, obviously, but it is never boring, always interesting. I found it so fascinating, obviously, because I'm wanting to reread it, but I love this book. I recommend it to anyone that asks for a nonfiction book, especially if they're into like hippie culture and anti-war movements and things like that. If you're political, bestie, this is the book for you, okay? This will make you even more political, even more radical. I think it did for me. So it's really, really good. Highly recommend. I will be rereading this very, very soon, like first chance I get. The next book I'm hoping to read is Breaking the Social Media Prism: How to Make Our Platforms Less Polarizing by Chris Bale. I have heard nothing about this book. Absolutely nothing. But I saw it on either Goodreads or Storygraph, and I just thought it sounded really interesting. The back of the book says, an eye-opening look at how user behavior is powering deep social divisions online and how we might yet defeat political tribalism on social media. So it's a little bit political, a little bit social. It's very small. so it's not very intimidating, but I have been putting it off. So this is on my list, my to be read, my TBR, my school year hopefuls, if you will. So if you're interested, read along with me and let me know what you think when you're done. Next up, I've been putting this one off for so long, and I don't know if I'm intimidated by it or if I'm just like, whenever a book gets hyped up a lot, I'm really hesitant to pick it up, and I think that's why I haven't picked up Hood Feminism yet, because I feel like it's on everybody's recommendation list, and when that happens, it makes me wary of the actual value of the book, which is weird. But whenever a lot of people like a book, I'm always like, I wonder if I'm going to be the one person that doesn't like it. But anyways, I haven't read this yet, and I need to. So it is on my to-be-read list for this school year. I've heard nothing but great things. I gotta stop putting it off. So I'm reading this. Next up is a book that I know I read when I was young, but I don't think that I fully appreciated the contents of it. And I also think that it is very relevant to current events. So, The Diary of Anne Frank. I, first of all, love this edition, love this cover, but I remember reading it, kind of, but I don't really remember like what I thought about it or the feelings that it evoked in me. So I would really like to do a reread of it, do some annotations, maybe do a little bit more in-depth study on the contents of the book. So I'll be rereading this. I recommend you do so as well. Let me know what you think upon a reread or a first-time read. And lastly, the nonfiction book that will be on my list for this fall / this school semester / this school year is A Queer History of the United States by Michael Bronski. I have read, I believe it was the Latinx history of the United States. I've read one of these in this series, and I really liked it a lot. I am excited to read this one. I've had it for a while, but I haven't really been in the mood for like a history textbook book, and that's kind of what these are. Or at least that's what the first one was like. But as a woman who was previously homeschooled and did not get a lot of diverse history, this is a necessary read for me. So I'm excited to read it. I'm a little bit intimidated, but I think it's going to be really, really good, and I think it will expand my mind. So that will be on my list this fall. And there you go. That's all the books that I've got for you today. I hope that you got some good recommendations from this video. If you have any recommendations for nonfiction reads for this back to school season, please drop them in the comments below, because I'm always looking for new nonfiction recommendations. I feel like there are not enough booktubers, bookstagrammers who are talking about nonfiction. I love a good nonfic. So drop all your recs in the comments. Give this video a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll try to be a little bit more regular over here, but if not, you can always follow me on my Instagram at flippinpagesar. That's where I post more often. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.